today. Cheers. Victoria's Secret Pale Ale or IPA. I wasn't sure about the hop. I'd never used it before, so I was making it like a pale ale that's pretty hoppy, and I guess that's what it is. But it was a bit more bitter than I thought it would be. It tastes a bit more like an IPA, but I'm really starting to enjoy it. Today in the kitchen again, all grain brew this time. Only a 1 gallon, 5 litre brew. Just to show that, you know, if you haven't got a big setup or any fancy gear, you can still do a brew in the kitchen, and an all grain brew at that. This could be used for experimental brews or whatever you want. I happened to brew my infamous black metal IPA on Saturday, all grain, on my big rig in the garage. Today I'm doing the same scaled down version recipe in the crock pot or slow cooker, whatever you want to call them, just an everyday slow cooker. It could be done in a rice cooker. It could be done in my old 2-pot method. I'll put a link down how I used to do my mini mashers using 2 pots. I think Craig uses that method now for doing some of his beers. You could do it that way, but this time I'm going to show you how you can use your STC to control your crock pot. I've brewed yogurt before in it. If anyone knows about yogurt, it's got to be about 40 degrees for about 10 to 12 hours. I put the stuff that I need for yogurt, a bit of natural yogurt in the bottom and some milk, and put it in jars and whack it in the slow cooker, set it to 40 degrees with my STC, and away it goes. It's alright, I can leave it there and not have to think about it. It's the same STC setup I use for my brewing. When I say the same, it's exactly the same unit. The one I use for my brews outside, you might have seen me use. I use this to keep my fridge at the right temp, and on brew days I use this to control my HLT. Very handy things. People use induction plates, they could probably control their mash temp or their steeping time or whatever they want to do with the STC hooked up to their induction plate. Anything that you can stick the temperature probe in that's safe, and anything that you can plug in to your, or here it's 240 volt, whatever it is where you live, you can control with this hot and cold. Very handy. If you had a spa, you could hook your spa up to it. I don't have a spa. It'd be nice though. Anyway, so yeah, very handy thing. So the first thing I did was I measured how much my crock pot could hold, and it's about 5 litres, nearly exactly. So I put that into Beersmith, changed all my equipment settings around to deal with the 5 litre mash tun, and a boil pot that I could do on the stove. When you're going to end up with about 5 litres or 1 gallon, you don't need much of a big pot anyway. I think this is about 9 litres, could even be a bit less. Yeah, all kitchen equipment. I can't even find my grain bag today, my proper brew in the bag grain bag I was going to use in the crock pot. So yeah, I've found my wife's laundry bag. This one hasn't been used yet. Or if it has, I don't know about it. I'm going to clean it anyway, soak it in some sodium percarb, and it'll be fine. It's got a zip on it, it's going to be handy. So there you go, you don't even need a grain bag, just a laundry bag hanging around. Clean it first, boil it. I clean everything first, even if they've been washed in the sink. Some of these big pots you don't use very often, and they can be sitting in the back of your cupboard and you might think they're clean, but they get grease from the smoke and stuff around in the kitchen, and they get dirty. So just give them a rinse. I usually boil water in both of them just to clean them, make sure they're clean. There's no grease and gunk stuck in them. So I'll put a link to the recipe down below as usual, and we'll get to it, eh? So you're better off starting off with some sort of test, of course. This slow cooker has only got low and high, unfortunately. And low was a bit high for the mash, so I'm going to have to use my temperature controller on it. So I just place the temperature probe inside, not right on the wall where the elements are that heat it. These elements that heat these waters are right on the wall. You'll get a sort of a false reading that way. just off the wall though. I don't want it in the middle because it'll be a lot hotter near the edges. It'll be easier when there's grain in there to stick that in. About an inch away from the edge should do it. But what I've got in here to start with is some sodium bicarbonate, or you could use OxyClean or whatever cleaner you use, just to make sure there's no grease from food or whatever we last cooked in there, even though it's clean. Okay, and so what I've also got in there is a laundry bag. I actually couldn't find my grain bag. I don't use it very much anymore, but it's around somewhere. But I found a laundry bag, which was made for, I think bought for my wife's underwear or whatever she washes in them. This is a clean one. Hasn't been used, but I'm just washing that in the sodium bicarbonate too, just to make everything sure everything's clean. Over here, I'm doing a test boil. I haven't done a boil with about this much water on the stove before, so I'm just test boiling to see how much boil off I get. I put 6 litres in there. I'm going to boil it for an hour, just to see how much boil off rate I get, and get my calculations right for this brew. At the same time, that cleans the pot too. Even though the pot was clean, I like to boil a bit of water in it, just to make sure I get all the soap residue and anything else that might have been left behind after cleaning it. So I'm going to add what I suppose you call it the strike water to the crock pot. It's actually 3 1/3 litres is what Beersmith told me to use for my 5 litre batch and my grain size. I'll turn this up. The temperature probe's not actually in it at the moment. I'll turn this up and set it to my 66.7, which is where I wanted it. So let's set it 66.7 at the moment. Now I'll put the temperature probe in. Now I had the crock pot plugged into the normal power point to try and see what it would stay at, set it low, and it was too hot. So I've got to plug it in to the temperature controller, into the heat side of course, and I'm just going to plug nothing into the cool side. So there we go, that 3 1/3 litres of water should heat up to around the 67 degree mark. Sometimes they overshoot a bit, but that's what happens. I'm not going to put the strike water to a higher temp like you do in your mash tun. I know it will drop when I put the grain in, but I'm just not sure how much it will drop. This will hold a lot of heat because that's what they're made to do. So if I put this up to my usual 72, 73 degrees when I add the grain, and it usually drops down to be perfect, I'm not sure this will drop down enough. So what I'm going to do is get it up to about my mash temperature, which is a 66.7 or close enough to 67 degrees, add the grain, and that won't take long at all to go back up to that 67, maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. Now this could easily be done in the slow cooker without the temperature controller, because they hold heat really well. You'd have to turn it on, get it up to temperature, use maybe a handheld thermometer if you haven't got a digital one, get it to the right temp, turn it off, shut the lid. You could check it again after half an hour, and if it's dropped too much, you could turn it on for a little while. Just keep a watch on the temperature with a thermometer, and as soon as it gets to that temperature you want it, well this 67 for this recipe, turn it back off, put the lid back on, and you'll be right. Now there's most of my grain. I got it made up at the shop. It's just over a kilo of a 2-row pale ale malt, some roasted barley, and some cara for 3. I'll put a link to the recipe. But because I didn't get it all, because I already had some chocolate malt in the fridge. That actually isn't crushed, so I'll have to crush that. And I had some crystal in the fridge as well. So I just got to weigh out a bit of these to add, and I'll show you how I crush that chocolate malt too. And you may just ask why I've got some crushed and why uncrushed. Well, the crushed stuff I get if I know I'm going to use it within a couple of weeks. I still keep it cold in the fridge. And the uncrushed stuff is the chocolate, which I got I don't know, there's about half a kilo there. I only use in small amounts. So this could last me 6 months. So I don't get it crushed, and I just crush it up as I need it. This is mainly my grains for my extract beers. When I do all grain, I just get it all into one bag, crushed at the shop. I don't have a crusher or buy my own grain in bulk yet, and it's only because I do so many different beers and use so many different specialty malts that for me to keep all them on hand would mean I'd have to store a lot. I just haven't got the room for it. I have a really good deal with the way I get my grain, so I don't need to buy in bulk. I don't need to store it at home. It's a waste of space. It's a waste of extra bit of time that I don't have. If that deal changes at any time and I have to pay more for my grain or anything, then I probably will start doing it at home. I'll have to work something out. So there it is there, my 80 grams of crystal, which was already crushed, and my 20 grams of chocolate, which I'm about to crush. So there's the 20 grams. I've just put it in a Ziploc bag. You want to lay it down like that. Try and squeeze the air out because you want to be able to get to the grains. You want to use a thicker bag like this, not so much a freezer bag, because a freezer bag will just rip from one of these sharp grains. You can use a rubber mallet, anything. I'm using a rolling pin, and you'll find, especially with these darker grains, they're quite brittle and they break really easy. There's nothing wrong with giving a bash if you think you need to. And since this is sort of a brew in the bag, it doesn't really matter if you end up going too fine. You will get little holes in the bag, but that's enough. So you can either wait and just put this straight in the pot, or I can give you a look. Just try and get it all out. I'll take a little bit more time with that later, but I'll just show you. It's now crushed. Okay, we're up to temp. As you see, we've overshot a bit by a degree, I think, but that's okay. That's all right. Now I'm just going to empty my grain into this bag. It is going to be dusty. If you can do it in there and have a bigger bag that can go over the sides, like I would have been able to do with my grain bag if I could have found it, would probably be better. But this is a pretty fine bag. I'm not going to lose much anyway. So I'll just empty that into the bag. There we go. I'm going to add, pick it up before I drop it. I'm going to add my chocolate, 20 grams of chocolate I crushed, and my crystal. There we go. I might even do the zipper up just in case it rolls over. Advantage of having one of these, I guess. Take the lid off and put that in. Now you just want to make sure that it all gets wet. Give it a good mix up. I don't know if you've just noticed the temp went down a little bit when I stuck the grain in. It's okay. It's what we want. We're closer now to where it should be. Make sure it's as loose as can be in there. You could do this without a bag at all and then strain it. It'll just get a little bit more messy and stuff. I'm pretty happy now that all that grain's wet, as it'd be much easier with an open bag over the edges, and you can make sure and stir it all in, but I haven't got that today, so you work with what you got. And it's truly household items this time. Without even a grain bag. You could use an old curtain, boil it, clean it, sew it up to a bag shape. There's lots of different materials you can get and use as a bag. The bag doesn't get boiled in this, so you know, you don't have to worry about that. Alright, there we go. I'm going to whack the lid back on. That's gone down to 64.5, can you see there? Might be a bit hard to read. And she'll be right. I'll just make sure that it probes in a good spot where I want it. There we go. The STC will turn it on if it gets too cold. I doubt that's going to lose much temp. That'll heat up now. It'll probably overshoot a little bit. But then I'll be surprised if that comes back on again. That'll probably keep its temperature. So anyway, once that gets up to temp, or even now, that's starting to mash now at this temperature. You can start your timer for an hour, maybe an hour and a quarter, just to be sure. And as I said, if you don't have a temperature controller, use a handheld thermometer or a digital one that you can, a probe you can stick in there. Just turn it on till it gets into your range you want. Once it gets up to your 66.7, turn it off. That'll hold temp. Come back and check it in 15-20 minutes. Turn it on again if you have to, and then turn it off once you get to your temperature. It's that easy. There you go, so that's switched off now at 66.7. It's going to go up a little bit from the residual heat, but not enough to hurt anything. I'll just give you a quick look. I should have gave you a look. Looks a bit messy in there, doesn't it? Remember, it's a black IPA, this one. Okay, so the mash is up. The mash time's up. As you can see, my temp's a little bit up. I did go a little bit higher than that, just because there's residual heat in this. It's something you have to work out with your own slow cooker. And the more times you do it, the better you get at it. You might have to set it a little bit lower because it overshoots when it heats, but it's only a little bit on here. I think I went up about half a degree, a little bit more over what I wanted, but that's fine. Now I could ramp this up and mash out in it. I could ramp up the temperature. And you could do the same with a normal crock pot without a temperature controller. You could just turn it up to high and keep an eye on the temperature. Or the way I'm going to do it is just, I'm going to batch sparge in 5 litres of water, which I've got bringing up to temp. I'll heat that up to about 75 degrees, 76 degrees, and I'll just bring the bag straight from the slow cooker into the batch sparge water. Okay, we're at about 75 degrees now. That'll be fine for the batch sparge. Just try and put this where you can see it. The mash has cooled down a little. That doesn't matter at all. It's just cooled down since I've been waiting for this water to come to temperature. Yeah, things could get messy here, but we'll see how we go. It's going to be warm. Just let it drain a little. You don't have to let it drain all out, because it's all going to end up back in this pot anyway. That'll do. Into the batch sparge. It'll be very full. It's like a tea bag. Did that perfectly. Maybe a little too full. Just too full. It's going to go in. Oh. Now I'll just leave that there for about 10 minutes. I did measure it, but as you can see it's a little bit full. I'll just take a cup out of the air out, that's alright, and whack it in there, because that water's going to end up back in it anyway. Just so I can... These are the things that happen. No stress at all. There you go, now I can move that around a bit without having to worry I'm going to spill it everywhere. There's no harm, don't use anything sharp on your bags. I'm giving it a poke. As I said, just leave that 10 minutes or so. It's the mash out and it's the batch sparge at the same time. That's been sitting there a while now. 10 minutes or so. Should like a big tea bag. As much as I juice out as you can. There's various different ways you could have done this. I could have held this over a big pot and slowly poured water through it, some hot water through it, just to rinse out the goodness. This isn't for a competition or anything. I'm just making a nice beer for myself. I'm not too worried about if I'm a couple of points under gravity or anything. Okay, gets a little bit heavy. This is only about 1.25 kilos grain. Probably about 3 pound. People say don't squeeze, but I think that's a crock. Not going to hurt. Except that water's hot, that will hurt. Well, you can take this as far as you want. You could let that drain right out. You could find a strainer that might fit on top, maybe. This one's probably not going to fit on this pan properly. And sit it on top and just let it drain. I'm just sort of showing you that you can just do all grain beer, even though this is only a small batch. Just with normal household stuff. Okay, that'll do for me for this demo. And I'm also going to pour what was in the slow cooker in. I probably actually could have left a tiny bit off the bottom of that. You might have seen a little bit of junk go in there. It's only the stuff that fitted through the net, but the net's very fine. It's about the same sort of net you'd use for brewing the bag. So that little bit of junk is what people with brewing the bag have to deal with too. We are a bit full. I can either transfer that to a bigger pot, or I could go ahead and boil in this. I've often boiled in pots this size before. You will get boil off. You want to get it down to about your 5 litres in the end. That's your pre-boil all grain wort. I always call it wort, but it's actually called wort. So just waiting for that to come to the boil. I've weighed out my hops. That's the 60-minute edition, a 15-minute, 10-minute, 5-minute and a flame-out edition. Oh, we're nearly there. Pretty full.
Yeah, it's pretty full.
Looks like a chocolate milkshake.
A chocolate milk? Let's have a look.
Okay, we're now at the beginning of the boil. I've let it boil for a little while to settle down. I'm going to set my timer for 45 minutes and add my first edition hops. The measurements will be in the recipe, of course, which I don't get a boil over. That's fine. And there's the alarm for my 15-minute edition. Add that in. I used to have these little packets. Ooh, get it in there. That's all. Another 5 minutes, I'll add the 10-minute. Okay, just about time for the 10-minute edition. So one of the details, the recipe is going to be on the site, link down the bottom. There's the 10-minute. Now set that for another 5 minutes for the 5-minute edition. Here we go for the 5-minute edition. Put that in. Put it all in there. Okay, just waiting for the alarm to go off for the last 5 minutes so I can put in the flame out edition hops or whirlpool hops. Not really going to do a whirlpool in this, but we will be doing a steep, a whirlpool or a steep. Alright, now that's it. So turn off the heat, put the last lot in, and just let that sit. You can see that it's got enough residual heat movement around in there to mix it in. You don't really have to mix it. And just let that sit for 10 minutes before we start chilling. Okay, now, so after the 10 minutes, I'll put it in the laundry sink. Just going to give it a cold water bath, cool it down. If I ran this through my chiller, I'd probably lose half of it through waste in the chiller. There is a little hole there with the steam that usually gets out, so I might just put a bit of aluminium foil over that, just to be ultra safe. But this also shows you how you can do it at home without any expensive equipment. So you just fill it up with cold water. You make sure you keep an eye on it because you don't want it to start floating and tip over. You can usually go to about the same level as where the wort is, of course, before it starts floating. Stir it around a little bit, leave it, come back in 20 minutes and change the water. Leave it for probably another 20 minutes and you're probably going to get down close then to pitching temp. Okay, it's getting a bit dark in here now. Hope it's not too dark. Here's my 1 gallon or 5 litre demijohn. There's the wort that's cooled right down. It's probably still a little warm. Once I get it in there, I might just leave it a little while before I pitch the yeast. And I have a funnel in the star sand, a blow off tube and a bung for the top, just in case it gets messy. So just give you, that's all you got to do, just put your hand over the top, as long as your hand's clean. Bit of star sand in there, give it a shake around, let it sit for a while and tip it out. Now if I had to let that sit for a little while after I'd shaken it, there wouldn't be so much foam. Not that you have to worry about the foam, but... So then, of course, it's a pretty simple process. Make sure the funnel's sanitised, which it is. More bloody foam. Stick that in the top. And of course, just pour it in. Bit of star sand shooting out the side. Now it's going to get tricky here with all this foam in here. Or move it to the sink. That's a bit safer when I know the wife's going to be home shortly. I probably should have left the filter in the funnel. And because I've poured more than once, I'm getting a bit much tube and hop in there than I'd really like. But that'll probably do. Take the funnel out. I can have a wash. I'm going to just put that bung in there for a minute, put my thumb over it and give it a spray with star sand just to clean it up. Clean the side of the bottle up, that can be wiped down later. I don't mind a bit of junk around, but you don't really want it up around the neck, do you? Take that off. Give it a bit of a clean, it's all wet with star sand now, that rag. Put that in again. Now you can give that a shake if you're worried about not having enough oxygen in it. It's probably about 5 grams of yeast I had from another project. I'll just pop that in there. I'll get the bung out. Now again, that's all stuck to the neck, but I'm just going to do what I did before, star sand my hand up, put my hand over the top and give it a shake. That should get all the yeast off the neck and stuck around. As soon as I've done that, I'm going to bung in the bung I'm actually going to use, and these tend to slip out, these bungs. So especially when they're wet like they both are there now with the slippery star sand. But I sort of find, that's slipping out now, I sort of find what works, you push it in a little bit and then I push the hose in. It's going to keep it in there a bit better. Oh, do that again. Like that, and that's nice and tight. Now I'll come and check that in a little while. So because it's wet with star sand, I should have dried inside the neck probably. Just make sure it's still sitting in there. So that's it. In about 2 weeks, 2 weeks time I'll give it to ferment. Should be plenty. Then we'll bottle it. It'll be another 2 weeks because I have to bottle it after that, or a week, 2. And then it should be ready to go. So there she is with Big Brother fermenting away. That's been in about 4 days now, and she's there. We'll come and have a look in a couple of days. Anyway, that's it. Very easy process. Great way to try your first go at all grain without having to have any gear. There's many different ways to do it. I'll think of a few more. A small esky. I've even thought about, we ended up buying one of these easy yogurt things, but it would be a very small mash, you wouldn't fit much in there. Anything you can put heat under and control by electronics, or anything like some sort of esky, chiller, like that yogurt thing I just showed you, that will hold temperature, and it'll be fine. So hopefully we'll get 2 things out of this. One, how to brew in the kitchen again, an all grain brew, maybe your first all grain brew, or in a crock pot, or experimental little small batches. And 2, we'll be able to compare it to the one that I brewed, which is nearly exactly the same recipe, scaled down on the weekend in my bigger setup, just to see if there's any differences. There'll be a couple of small differences. I haven't done it in this crock pot before, so I haven't got all the numbers dialed in properly for different things. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be very, very close, and we'll be able to tell that in a couple of weeks. Alright, cheers.